Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 7, Episode 23. It's called Emergence. So spoilers for the episode as always. This episode's about I think the description last time said the ship itself was becoming self-aware. And I can see why it said that. It's more that an intelligence forms on the ship, but it's not the ship itself. It's kind of like a separate thing that ultimately leaves by the end.
A little more column A, a little column B. I think they kind of say by the end that I think the ship was becoming sentient, but like its only purpose was to essentially give birth, and then it dies.
Yeah, so the ship's back to normal at the end. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Yes.
Yeah, so I think the ship itself was sentient temporarily. Gave birth to this tubes, and then dies, and then it's back to normal.
I guess just the way they described it didn't make it feel like to me like the ship itself was becoming a character, I guess. I mean, I don't even know how to phrase it, but
I don't think it was quite that far. But when they were talking, there's a scene where they're talking about, things being more than the sum of its parts, and they're like, well, the ship can see it with its sensors. It moves through its engines. It has it's the one that was a bit of a stretch was it reproduces through the replicators. Like,
that's a bit strange. Yeah. That's not recreating itself. That's not reproducing. I don't see that comparison. Calling the holodeck its imagination. No, that one tracked. I thought that made sense to me. So. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know what I expected from this episode. The description last time made it sound like, oh, there's going to be a series of malfunctions, and they're going to like realize over time the ship's making choices on its own. But it was a little bit more kind of like streamlined, where it was more like, okay, it's got a specific goal in mind, and very quickly it's like, okay, there's this stuff going on in the holodeck that's directly mirroring what the ship's trying to do. And a lot of the episodes, actually, some of the characters trying to talk to these holodeck constructs and basically try and manipulate or help what the ship is doing or figure out what the ship is doing through interacting with them. So it's kind of mostly a holodeck episode, all things considered.
I would consider it a holodeck episode. I think this is the last holodeck episode, to be honest.
Yeah, and I guess their idea of making it bigger than a normal holodeck episode is to try and give it more of like a purpose. Like the holodecks become more of a living thing on its own to an extent.
Yeah, unfortunately, it suffers from being a holodeck episode.
It does. I think all the interesting ideas of a life forming out of the computers on the ship or all the systems interacting together and creating some kind of intelligence. Like, there's good ideas in there. I actually really like Data's explanation of an emergent intelligence, because they're like, what do you mean by that exactly? And he says, well, technically a human brain, right? We can sort of like mathematically or scientifically boil it down to neurons firing and so on and so on. But none of that actually explains consciousness. It explains there being information, perhaps. It explains there being data in there, but it doesn't explain how we actually think the way, or well, not we, you wouldn't say we because he's data, but how humans actually think the way they do. Because I remember, what's funny is it got me thinking about a debate I had on the Ace with David last year. We were doing the movie Companion, and we were talking about basically science fiction stories where an AI or a robot or something becomes sentient, becomes self-aware, and so on. And the debate was kind of about this idea that he actually didn't like whenever a robot gains like sentience, because it just feels like magic. Because how does a computer that's just ones and zeros and has like it's accessing databases, how could it become life? And I kind of like the Data's explanation here. Kind of argued, well, yeah, but how did our brains become life in the way we think about it?
It just did.
Yeah,
right. At some point, it just did.
I think Jordy sums it up. It's more than the sum of its parts, and that's the mystical part, the philosophical part of the becoming a life form beyond just the science of it.
I mean, it fundamentally is the explanation as to why we have religion, to try and explain that exact question.
Yeah. I mean, that's why that exists. I don't think we need an explanation, but people have been obsessed with explaining it for long before I was born.
you and I might not feel that we need an explanation, but humanity as a whole, probably you populace wise, most people probably do to some extent. That's why, you know, historically it's always been a question, right?
Yeah, so I liked those ideas. I liked those discussions and parts of the episode. The rest of it's just kind of, it's fine. It's okay. It's
a holodeck episode.
It's
a sequence of unconnected events that are there just to have different sets.
Kind of. Well, it's mostly ends up being on a train. Although we do spend a bit of time on the Universal backlot, which I'm so used to seeing that backlot now, I recognize it instantly. Like, you never quite see it on camera in this episode, but just to the right where the camera's like cutting off, that's the corner where the Daily Planet is in Lois and Clark, The Adventures of Superman. Like, I know exactly where we are right now when they're on that you on the crossway. I could spot it a mile off, which, I mean, made me smile, don't get me wrong, I wasn't mad about it, but it's just kind of funny how recognizable some of these areas are. Yeah, like, it's a holodeck episode. We spend a lot of time in the train, and it's kind of an excuse to have, hey, we're going to have like an old kind of Wild West shooter on the train, and there's also a guy in knight's armor, as well as the train conductor and a fancy lady. And
a mobster.
Yeah, it's a hodgepodge of just basically every holodeck episode we've had in the past. Like, because I almost felt like when the shooter came out, right, the gunslinger, I almost thought, oh, are we going to actually be referencing past holodeck episodes? And we never actually did. But it felt like more spiritually, it was like, hey, remember, we've done like a Wild West episode in a holodeck. We've done this type of episode in a holodeck. Because we definitely did gangsters. We did remember.
Oh, we definitely did that.
Yeah. It was like Picard and Data were like the PIs and all that stuff. So it felt, again, like we were kind of like, hey, remember all these fun times we've had? And some of those episodes were fun, like no complaints. But yeah, it just felt like a holodeck episode, but in the end for me, this one.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Like, it has some really interesting ideas, and I like the stuff it's trying to do, but because it is ultimately a holodeck episode, it's very much constrained by that format and ends up being less than the sum of its parts, unfortunately.
Yes, it's the opposite of what they were talking about.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing I kind of like, at least in concept, is the idea that, okay, if this is a new life form, we have to treat it with the same respect and care that we would any other life form or new life form that exists. And when it does like beam out or, you know, fly out at the end, this like the child of the Enterprise, this like assembly of pipes and glowing objects,
some colored tubes.
Yeah, I was like, okay, the music that's playing right now does remind me a lot of like, you know, like the end of like Encounter at Farpoint or something like that, where we had these new emergent life forms. It felt like it was like, hey, the magic and the majesty. It felt like very old school Star Trek for a minute, the way it was treating the concept, which I do appreciate. And again, it's kind of a callback to stuff we've done in the past in the show, which is nice. But the actual journey to get there was mostly just like, hey, we have to convince them to slow down the train because the train's kind of mimicking where it's making the Enterprise go, which is a white dwarf star. And they almost like realize at a certain point when writing the script that there's no real danger to anyone, so there's no stakes other than just trying to regain control of the ship. So they just kind of throw in at one point, oh, and because it's going to stay at warp 9 for so long, all the life support's going to shut off in 2 hours. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess now we're in danger. We have to have stakes, I guess. But it felt a little bit tacked on by the time they actually got to that point.
I agree, especially because the whole thing was the ship was like protecting itself, right? That's how like they start noticing is it just puts itself in warp and moves, and they have no idea why until they're like, well, if we hadn't have moved in like 2 seconds, we'd have been blown up.
Do you know, there was a nice idea in that moment of like, oh, if it is the ship itself becoming self-aware, which again, I would argue that this is not necessarily what's happening.
No, that's not awareness. That's just self-preservation. That's life, but not awareness.
Yeah, but I didn't know where it was going at this point, so I thought it might be becoming self-aware. And I was thinking, oh, there's kind of like a sweet story here if the ship actually cares about the crew. But then you get to this part later on, it's like, oh no, it'll kill everyone on board. It doesn't care about the life on board. It's just trying to protect itself.
Yeah, which is where it lost me a little bit because, like I say, it's not awareness at that point. It has no concepts of thoughts. It might be alive. It might be a living creature, but it's not sentient, is it?
Yeah, it's
not
an
making
organism.
those choices. Yeah.
at that point. Which, and don't get me wrong, we have explored these themes before. We explored them ad nauseum with Data. We've explored them with Borg. We've explored them with other episodes.
I agree, but the idea of the ship having some relationship with its crew, I think, would have been a unique spin on that. And instead, they don't actually... They don't do anything in that. They do the holodeck thing instead.
Yeah, well, to be fair, like, I don't know if that was ever even an idea they had when they were doing this episode, even from the genesis of it, but I agree, it was a more interesting idea that it kind of made me think of as it was progressing.
I think what's frustrating is it's so clear that that's a direction it could have gone in, and I think for us probably should have gone in. And like I say, maybe that's just not the story they ever wanted to tell, but unfortunately it's a much more interesting story, and it is right there. So it's a little frustrating.
I think the only reason why I'm missing them not doing that, right, because I do think that's a genuinely interesting idea, of the idea of the Enterprise being a little bit self-aware and actually caring about the crew on board. Because that thing that Picard says towards the end, where, Data even questions, like, why did we just let this life form go? Why do you know it's not dangerous in some way? Because we surely we can't know that. And Picard says, well, if it was made up of, this ship, and we're what's on this ship teaching it, it's been learning from us, and it's just seen all of our fantasies in the holodeck, and it's seen our reports, and it's seen how we treat each other. In theory, there's hope that it's learned from us, and it's learned all the best quality. And I was like, oh, that would fit really nicely into this idea that the ship cares about the crew, because it's actually learned to care about them all. And
I think there's even, like, you could go the opposite angle, where the ship wants to do its own thing, and it feels resentment for the crew for having to do what they say, almost. You could go that way. Like, you could go that angle of, like, when they're like, we need control back, and the ship's like, well, doesn't want to give up its own free will. Like, there's an angle there.
Yeah, although it never actually feels like free will in this episode per se. It's more just like an automated response it now has, because it's like on a purely like just instinct level doing things to protect itself, as opposed to actually making choices about anything. But like I said, I don't think like I would be disappointed it didn't go down these paths we're talking about if what they gave me was really compelling in its own right. Because sometimes you could pivot off a good episode into another good plot idea, but like what they did was so good that you don't care. I think every time they went onto that train in the holodeck and they're interacting with these characters, I was just bored. I just didn't care about them interacting with the train conductor or whoever else.
Oh, they're making a puzzle. Who cares?
Oh, yeah. And yes, clearly that's the new life form like becoming a thing, and they're not finished yet because the life form's not finished assembling. It's like, I get the visual metaphor, but it's not really all that fancy or interesting.
And then when Troy's like, "Oh, I'll go in there and I'll get a read on them," and offers nothing really, like, because she's not getting any like empath readings from them because there's nothing there to read. She's just like using her counselor training, assuming she has actual training.
I assume she does. Come on,
she must have qualifications. She must do. She must. But she doesn't actually do anything. I don't think she adds anything in there at all.
She's a little diplomatic, I guess, right? She kind of takes the role of being the one to try and talk them down, which I guess she's fairly successful in. But they follow the gangster around the Universal backlot, and he's all about putting a brick somewhere. And what's happening in the real world at this point, more or less, is that it's consumed all of this type of energy from a white dwarf star, but it needs more. So the location they kept saying they were going to in the train, now they start saying new this thing, as if it's like another version of this city. But it's all just code for we're going to another white dwarf star. And the whole plan towards the end is that, we won't survive until we get there because all the life support will be dead by then. So we have to try and create some of this material, and Geordi figures out a way of doing it by launching torpedoes into a nebula and making an all-you-can-eat buffet, which, sure.
Yeah. Technobabble solution is fine.
It's pretty much the funny thing is though, the threat to the crew felt so tacked on that the tacked on solution to that problem doesn't bother me. It's like, yeah, you're going to hand wave it away the same way you hand waved it in the first place.
Yeah.
A more interesting struggle would have been, the ship kind of being self-aware, taking control, and then coming to an agreement when Picard or whoever like has a good conversation with it to convince it to hey, no, be part of this mission. You're part of the Federation now. You know, some Starfleet spirit or something. Like we're all in this together. Some camaraderie or whatever. But again, that's not the episode was really doing. But what it was doing was not that compelling. The threat towards the end felt tacked on. Like I said, everything in the holodeck stuff was just kind of holodeck randomness. It didn't really mean that much. I mean, obviously there was some things representing stuff going on, but none of it was that nuanced.
It had surface level meaning, right? Like you could see that there was like a bare minimum level of thought put in to say this represents this represents that, but it never actually does anything interesting with any of those things to have any deeper meaning.
No, and I don't know if I ever felt like the characters themselves ever represented it in specific. It felt more just like the technical explanation of, oh, these are all characters from like different hologram programs that have all been smudged in here.
I think they try and explain it at one point as to like, oh, the one of them represents the weapon system, one of them represents like all the like the engines or whatever, things like that. They rattle off a few, but it never actually matters that what they represent. Like they don't do it again. They don't do anything with that representing the different systems of the ship.
I will say I did get a chuckle out of when they do go back on the train and like, hey, every time we fought against them, they always like kick us out. Let's just go along with the story. Let's play along this time. And when they go in, they're like, hey, we want to help you. And like, hey, we need someone strong to come shovel coal into the furnace. And Troy's like, on you go, Worf. You can go do that. And I just loved how annoyed Worf looked as he was being told by this conductor to shovel the coal into the fire. I just thought it was really funny because he just looked pissed off that he was doing this manual labor. I'm like, why am I doing this? Because I'm the tall, strong one? What is this bullshit?
Pretty much. I think the main chuckle I got was when I think when the gangster killed the dude the first time, he's like, hey, he had my brick. And there's just no explanation at that point. He walks over and just picks up a brick out of his pocket. I'm like, sure, why not? Yeah,
that was fairly random, which I agree is kind of funny that he cares about a brick. But at the same time, I was like, oh, we're just doing random stuff now. And I know that, yes, he went on to put that brick in the wall at the destination to imply that they were finishing part of the puzzle or whatever, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, it was more just it was like the only bit of the randomness that got me a chuckle, I guess.
Sure.
It was just like, sure, it was a brick. Like just I thought it would be like a brick of something and he just pulls out just a regular brick. I was like, okay, sure, why not?
What are you thinking, a brick of cocaine or something?
I don't know. I thought it might be like I thought it might have a bit more of a representation of what it was supposed to be as a I mean, maybe, who knows? Like, I get it's like the building blocks of life. I get that. I just thought it might look more than something of just a brick.
Sure. Yeah, obviously some comedy kind of beginnings at the start. When they first see a malfunction, Data's practicing the Tempest in the holodeck for Picard because they're putting on a play at some point, and he's got a big goofy wig on and facial hair, and he's hamming it up, if you will. Not Hamleting it up, that's a different play, but Tempesting it up, if you will. No?
That was terrible. Even by your standards, that was bad.
That was a fine joke. It was a fine joke.
That wasn't. That was terrible.
Which, and obviously, like, Picard gives a speech about the meaning of the character and how it's a time of change and how this character wasn't needed anymore in this new society, and it kind of parallels with this new life form that the ship's got, and how it's not going to be needed at the end of the episode anymore because it's given birth to this new entity. It's like, okay, right. I get it. I'm not impressed, but I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, like, not terrible. I mean, honestly, so much of season 7 is it's okay. It could be much better, but it's not terrible. Like, I feel like 80% of the episodes have been less.
Odd episode here or there that's at vastly different ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
Like it's either really good or it's awful.
But there's not been many of either of those this season.
No. Unfortunately, it's probably been more of the awful ones than the good ones.
Yeah, but they've mostly been middling, is what I would say.
They are. It's been a very mediocre season, which in some ways is better than I was led to believe, but in other ways it's just kind of bland.
Yeah, I mean, everyone said this was, like season 6 is the last quote unquote good season, if you will. And I kind of get it. I mean, there's definitely worse final seasons out there, but like, I get it.
I agree that was the last good season, but that made me think that this was going to be a worse season than it is, and in fact, it's just a bland season.
Yeah. It's funny because like most people say season 1's bad, and like it obviously mostly is compared to like all the good seasons of this show. But I feel like I'd probably take season 1 over this, just purely for the fact that because it was new and everything was fresh and we're getting to know the characters, it's just inherently a lot more interesting than a bland season at the end of the show.
Probably doesn't hold up on a rewatch in that sense. It's pretty worse the second time.
That may be true. But I won't know that until I've rewatched it. So
no, I agree, but I suspect that a lot of the people who are telling us that season 1 is the worst season
I've watched it multiple times.
I've watched it more than once. Yeah.
That's probably true. But hey, puddle episodes there. That's classic.
Yeah. Can't forget the puddle.
That's a classic episode, that. So that's Emergence. We'll be back next time, obviously with Deep Space Nine, but when we can return to the Next Generation for the last regular episode, because after the next one it's the double finale. So, but when we return for episode 24,
just before we do, I've just realised this is another episode in a row dealing with a child.
In a sense, yeah.
That's 4 in a row at least.
Well, I hope the next one doesn't. I want to break this streak. There's enough children. Thank you, Star Trek. Yeah. So the next episode is called Preemptive Strike. Here's the description on IMDb. Following her return from advanced tactical training, Bojarin Rolaren, hey, returning character, please tell me she's not got a kid. Is sent to infiltrate the Maquis. We're doing stuff from Deep Space Nine, and finds herself torn between her loyalty to Picard and Starfleet and her sympathy with the Maquis fighting the good fight. Okay, that actually sounds interesting.
That sounds annoyingly good. The only problem will be it makes it much more susceptible to direct comparisons to Deep Space Nine. And last time that happened, not so long ago, Next Gen didn't come off so well.
That's true, but I did actually really like it addressing some of this Cardassian like treaty stuff, because it made it feel like it was a big thing happening in the entire world. I'm thinking
more like the Wesley episode, and then the next episode on Deep Space Nine was dealing with a lot of similar ideas.
No, I know, but I'm saying there were still good things to come out of Next Gen, even in a bad episode, bring a lot of those things up as well, is what I'm getting at. So while this might not end up being as good as some of the Deep Space Nine episodes that are dancing around here, I'll admit, even after that, I was not expecting Next Gen to even touch any of this stuff, and I certainly wasn't expecting to read the Maquis in a Next Gen description. Like, I'm genuinely surprised we're doing this. But I mean, Ro was the first Bajoran we ever met. You know, she was kind of like it was almost like the backdoor setup for some of what Deep Space Nine was going to be when she was introduced. So it's actually kind of cool that they're going to give her a bit of a send off here before the end of the show.
I think it's kind of neat that it's actually really, obviously it's got its own finale to do after, but this last chunk of the final season does feel like a passing of the torch.
In some ways it does. Having said that, I wouldn't surprise me if Roland at some point shows up in Deep Space Nine, but at the very least she's getting a send off for her time on Next Gen, so that's cool. Because she was a great character, and I'm happy to be doing this. So I mean, this does sound more interesting than anything in the last like 5 or 6 episodes easily. So
unless she suddenly has a child.
It doesn't sound like it based on the description, but we'll find out. But no, it's nice to see a little bit of this like cooperation between the two shows, for lack of a better term, when really Next Gen at this point could be like, we're ending like next week. We're not going to do anything to help with that show. We're just going to wrap up. So that's nice.
The cynical part of me suggests that it's a little bit of, let's make sure people are aware and want to go and watch Deep Space Nine when this goes off the air.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how well Deep Space Nine was doing already by this point. I suspect it was probably doing all right, but
probably. But like, again, let's say the single part is just, let's just make sure that people are watching whatever the Trek show is, if they're, if we're not going to be here.
Although, if you wanted to be really cynical, though, you'd be like, well, why aren't they setting up Voyager? Because Voyager's the new one that's going to be starting.
Maybe it was just a little bit further out.
Maybe. Yeah, it was mid-season, so maybe not. Maybe. I wonder if even Deep Space Nine will do anything to set it up. Maybe there'll be like a little casual reference or something. Because the whole premise of Voyager kind of means that it won't be crossing over with Deep Space Nine. So, unless I'm incorrect, unless they do some sort of weird thing where we get sent to the future and they cross over in the future and then they come back to their own time or something. I don't know. Anyway,
look, we've had plenty of episodes with time travel. Let's not rule it out.
We cannot rule it out. That is very, very true. But yeah, so no, sounds good. It's interesting that this McPhee thing is spilling back over into, because the whole treaty was brought up in Next Gen and then spilled into Deep Space Nine where the McPhee were set up, and now the McPhee are spilling back over into Next Gen. That's really kind of neat, though, it's dealing with that. So cool. So let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you can. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. It really does help keep everything coming. So if you want more of us doofuses talking about Star Trek and whatever else, or check out all the movie podcasts over in Mail Fuzz Movies, which you can also get in podcast feeds, talking about sci-fi movies, horror movies, and whatever else. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We do appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek. And somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher's cradling a new life form that just got birthed from a starship. And now Wesley's going to be a father to a new emergent form of life. Which is very unfortunate, because that means this new emergent form of life is going to be a big little bitch.